All right, here we are. My first ever live stream on Killing for Company. For anyone who's tuning in, thank you so much for watching. If you didn't catch the promo that came through earlier today, tonight I'm going to be talking about, without question, my favorite record here of 2023. I have been, for anyone who has taken the time to sort of talk to me about my favorite records throughout 2023, it's always been Sacred Outcry. As soon as this album came out, it was without question the record I was spinning the most. And I haven't seen a whole lot of talk, especially here on the Metal VC on YouTube, about this record. So I recruited a friend tonight to talk to me about it. I have to say, in some ways, I can partially thank him for getting me into this band, but we'll get into that in a second. I also want to say thanks to Sacred Outcry, who have also sort of chimed in and made some opening comments in the chat, reached out to me earlier today. Deeply appreciated. Anytime you get to talk about an album that you love and the band themselves sort of reciprocate the appreciation, thank you so much. So without further ado, on my first live stream here on YouTube, I'm going to bring out our guest. So Marty Worm.
Hey, what's going on?
Thank you so much for joining me here for this album review / live stream tonight.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. I love your channel and love you. Great guy. It's awesome to collaborate on stuff like this.
So just a little bit of background. Obviously, Marty and I do the album club every Wednesday. And part of that conversation often in the background is like, what are you listening to? Or anything that sort of got your attention. And one of the albums that Marty had talked about at length and Brain Smasher Ben had talked about at length that I needed to hear, despite this has always been Halloween Central and power metal, that has been Marty's thing for the past how many years, was this album. So we have here Lost Horizons, Awakening the World. And man, it really grabbed me. Was a super special record, but kind of opened a door into potentially being interested in a little bit more of your power metal, listening European power metal style. So I just want to say hello to everyone in the chat. I see people are coming in and saying hi. Good to see everyone. So I kind of wanted to start this one. This will be a kind of a free-flowing discussion, Marty, but I approached this record with you specifically because of Daniel's presence, but it's also this new, young kind of power metal thing. So I was curious to get your thoughts about when I sort of threw this album your way. Were you hesitant? What did you think? And the prospect of a new sort of power metal or traditional heavy metal band that included Daniel, given your history with Lost Horizon, what were your thoughts?
You can't go wrong with this guy. I mean, to be honest, he has been around. I mean, here's a couple things he's done. Dim Have. This is the Boreal Flame. I listen to. Flip me over there. You can do it. There you go. The Boreal Flame. This is kind of proggy, technical power metal, but of course he sounds great on it. The songs are really busy. It's a solid record. I haven't listened to it a ton because it's kind of not a very welcoming album. It's very technical, complex, and it's like the first song is long and it's mostly an instrumental. So they've got one of the best singers in metal and they didn't really use him to his fullest. It's not Daniel Unleashed on this. And of course, another Greek band employed him to be singer Warrior Path. This is the Mad King. This, again, is a really good record. Daniel is, of course, a welcomed addition to it. But the music, it's good, but it's not, again, it's not like a Lost Horizon, like mind-blowing, over the top. So the fact that, and he's also done others like a band called Haven. He was in that, might be his thing only. He's done, I think he was in a band, sang on an album by a band called Crystal Eyes from Germany, I want to say. Could be wrong on that, but, and he's done some stuff on like these power metal opera type. One guy writes all this stuff and has a bunch of singers come on. It's kind of like an Avantasia thing. He's done stuff, with Kiska, two of the best singers, in metal singing on the same song together. Yes, please. I still haven't bought the CD yet, but he's been around and his voice is immaculate. But to hear this album, finally, I mean, he sounds good on everything I've heard. Amazing. Perfect. On this, it's like a perfect fit. Is it Lost Horizon? Lost Horizon has got a lot more, like, especially on Awakening the World, like you've shown it. There's a speed metal element to it. There's an aggression to it. This is more in the power metal vein, but it's perfect for me because his the passion and emotion in his voice matches the caliber of the music created. And he takes an already solid, well-considered, very thought-out musical piece and embellishes it, makes it even better. So, yeah, I mean, as soon as I heard that he was singing on this, I jumped at I'm not, I wonder what, I don't care. I'm going to hear it. I want to hear it. It can't be bad. You know what I mean? What did you think?
Well, I had heard, so back in 2020, just so you know, Towers of Gold was not my first exposure to this band. So I'll flip myself over here. Boom, making progress. Yep. So Damned for All Time came out in 2020. And this record, so when I first saw it, I have to say, like, my openness to European power metal was rather limited. And I looked at that album cover and it looked to me like a kind of like a video game, sort of like
I want to circle back around to this point. Keep going.
Okay. So I was kind of hesitant, right? Like, this is not necessarily my jam. And I heard on the CD, it's the second track here. It's the first one, Legion of the Fallen. And I really dug it. And this record slowly grew on me. So it was one of those first sort of European power metal records that kind of started to open a door as I was sort of learning more about the history of the genre. Now, this record has got an interesting history. This band is from Greece and formed essentially in the late 90s, had put together this record, and through all sorts of trials and tribulations, I think they had to like re-record it 3 different times because the mastering and mixing failed. Like, several things during the course of the release didn't go according to plan, and the cost and sort of the emotional toll it took on the band sort of ruined their enthusiasm for the release. So what should have been put out in like 2003 just kind of sat on the shelf. And if they were going to release it, they were going to do it properly. So here, 20 years later, over 15 years later, we get Damned for All Time. And I really liked that record. We'll get into the songwriting throughout this sort of stream tonight, but there's something else going on, right? Like, this is, to your point, not Lost Horizon. There's a different kind of songwriting to this. And what we kind of learn is their influences are also pulling from a lot of American bands. So the primary songwriter in the band, I'll get this, George Apollodemus. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Primary songwriter here. And I saw in an interview that he initially hoped that this band would offer the vocals and bass playing found in Manor War and the drumming and guitar playing of Warlord. So not, this isn't a band that's necessarily citing Halloween, for example, as their primary influence.
Yep.
Nonetheless, the European power metal is all over this record. So I think to kind of circle back to your question about what was the initial appeal for me, it was they were traversing to some degree in a style of traditional heavy metal or American epic heavy metal that I was sort of really, really interested in and had been sort of building enthusiasm for over the years. But this, band kind of reinterpreted those influences in a way that also was sort of coinciding with more and more European power metal influences. So that synergy is probably the most interesting thing for me personally about this band.
Right.
So I guess I have a couple of other questions I wanted to run past you for tonight. So
Hold on 1 second.
go ahead.
And Alan said in the chat that you decided to where is it?
Stop worrying and love the cheese.
Yeah. See, and I get why people that are into extreme metal, they have a hard time navigating or being comfortable or saying that, making the decision within themselves that it's okay to like. I mean, I come from Kiss. I come from traditional metal first, and Dio, and then Ozzy, and then grows from there until Metallica wandered into my path, and then I get more extreme. But my roots are hard rock and metal, and even when I fell into the thrash and death and black metal sphere, yeah, there was always Halloween. They never went the early stuff. I went late to Darius, but I had a hard time. I'm listening to this cult stuff. If I hear something like this, I'm like, oh, I can't listen to that crap, blah, blah, blah. It's too happy. But really, once you find a breakthrough band, I mean, I'm not saying that Sacred Outcry is your breakthrough band. There's other bands too, but you're coming from you come from the punk, you come from punk, you get into metal, you start off on the extreme side of it. And now all of a sudden here's stuff like this or stuff like Twilight Force or whatever. It's got more of a uplifting appeal to it. And yes, some of these bands like Twilight Force, again, they lean heavy into the Velveeta stuff, and it's hard. But once you realize how technical and proficient and talented, and decide that I just want to have fun listening to music or feel uplifted or not feel like crap or downtrodden or depressed, all it takes is a band like this or Lost Horizon or whatever. Yeah, and like Ben says, I think Lost Horizon was my breakthrough band. Once you click with a band, you start to listen to other bands within the genre a bit differently. Would you say that might be part of the case in your journey as well?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair, for sure.
And it's also safe to say that this album, and they're both of their albums, there's not any cheese on here. They're not cheesy power metal records. There's no elves and fairies and people dressed up with pointy ears and stuff. This record, it has a very strong emotional pull to it. It's very much a deep, high-minded record. It's very much different from, I think, what's wildly popular in Europe. Of course, I'm an outsider looking in. I've never been to Europe. I can only see what I see online and what the major labels are scooping up. You got your Sabatons, which I do like, Twilight Force, which I do like, and Angus McSix, cheese. He's the king of Cheese Mountain, but I like it. My kid likes it, and it is catchy. It wormed its way into my ear. I like it. It's going to make maybe my year-end list. We'll see, but there's a difference between that type of European high dollar, big numbers. What's another one? Windrose. My kid likes that too. They dress up like dwarves and sing about Middle Earth, and it's like Sabaton with dwarves. But this is different from that. Well, I don't know if it's the American influence that's seeping in here or what, but it's a very serious record. Anyway, you were going to say, I'm rambling.
It's okay. I mean, we have to remember this band is Greek, right? And I think that's also a country that does have a whole lot of epic heavy metal to it.
Yep. This Warrior Path is also Greek.
Right. So yep. I think it's probably a little bit of the two of them, meaning between sort of pulling from the American epic heavy metal influences and also being from a country that has really embraced epic heavy metal And obviously they're on No Remorse Records, which is a label that puts out tons of great new traditional heavy metal bands that are playing in this style. So I think it absolutely fits. But I do want to spend some time here. You were mentioning about the cheese. And I was curious about the timing of this record, or essentially the band's sort of rise to not just awareness and popularity in recent years, because from someone who's been listening to specifically European power metal, I know your interests extend beyond that, but I think contextualizing a band that potentially would have been coming out at the turn of the millennia. When you think about other like large now, I mean, the bands that have 20 some years of releases that are huge. You just saw Halloween and they opened with Hammerfall opened for them. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what Glory to the Brave is 97, 98.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the other bands that sort of emerged at the turn of the millennia. Sabaton comes to mind. I mean, during that time period, if they had come out, if whatever version of Damned for All Time was released in 2003, I'm just wondering about sort of where you think they would have stood, how it could have potentially impacted their career. Would they have been sort of overshadowed by potentially larger names at the time? Or do you think they could potentially be looking at a career where they'd be in the same stage with something like Hammerfall, for example?
Could they have with their songwriting and talent? Yes. But I mean, it's the big what if, isn't it? And it all depends on how committed is the band. Is the band going to go out and do a tour? Are they going to tour Europe? They're going to play the big festivals. They're going to get on the festivals. It all kind of depends on, I hate to say it, but what label they're on. I mean, if they were picked up and signed by Nuclear Blast or, whoever the big label is that really, like Sabaton, Nuclear Blast, probably, then it's a bit different. They get a different, they're given a different key to the gate. They get kind of a easier access to more exposure. No Remorse Records. I've seen, I'm not super familiar. It's a Greek label, right?
Correct. Yep.
I know they put out stuff, but I don't know what sort of pull this label has. But is the band going to get out there and get on the road? Are they going to play the festivals? That is the make or break. And in Europe, it's being a band like this, you have to play those big festivals to get in front of all those people for people to really stand up and take notice. I mean, and you got a talent like Daniel singing for your band. There should be they probably wouldn't have needed him because the music is good on its own, but they got him and he's an amazing talent and he really brings a lot out of this music. Having him back, doing it in front of a large amount of people. I don't know how. I know there's a couple live things of Lost Horizon online, but I don't know how extensively they played either. But they did play some shows. They played a handful. Right. Maybe that's why his voice is in such pristine shape, because I don't know how much touring the guy's done. I don't know how much, nightly abuse he's put his vocal cords through. But I'm starting to get off topic here. But it's the what if. It's the big what if. I mean, their music, yes, I think it could go the extra distance and it could have gotten them further down the road. But again, it all depends on their situation. Are they able to play live? Are they going to play shows? Are they going to get out? And I don't think a band like this it's essential for them to come to America. That would probably kill a lot of things, but they are certainly within striking distance of hundreds of fests a year in Europe. In Germany alone, there's a ton of fests. Getting on one or two of those would certainly, I think, change their fortune for sure. And it would have find them competing with bigger bands. It would have put them on stages with bands that were doing cheesier stuff than they are. And I think people get drunk at these things and like watching bands that are dressed up like superheroes and, swinging paper mache axes around. But a band like this is going to go up and really lay down some sick music and awesome emotion. What do you think?
So, I mean, here's, I guess, my follow-up question. Do you think is that the stage that they should be on? I mean, not because whether they're good enough, but in terms of the style of music that they play. Meaning, like, do you think they would
That's
be
a good question, because this album, it's a very cerebral record. It's not a, that's a good question. I mean,
like, would you rather see this band paired with Atlantean Codex, or would you rather see them paired with Powerwolf?
oh, I mean, Atlantean Codex all day long. I think they're a
Right.
very similar nature of beast, emotionally. I keep going back to emotion because this record, it's
Sure.
got a lot of it, and it's yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Which puts them in smaller festivals, but still festivals nonetheless. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Um. So let's talk about that emotional side of things,
Okay.
because we've kind of talked about Daniel's role in the band, and that obviously plays a role. But this is also a concept record, um, is told in a lyrical epic fashion. So there is a cohesive narrative to this story. Um, and tying into sort of how collectively this album sort of is experienced, like there's also this tonal, textural, colored nature to the instruments and the production.
Mm.
So throughout the entire listen, it feels like, in the same way that like a country or a city can also be a personality within a story. I think the sound of this record is also a sort of a character that needs to be addressed when we talk about it. So um, part of that could be that it's kind of a slow burn, so you get a chance to really, wade into that.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm just curious in terms of how did you hear that, and how did it sort of, how did you realize that sort of played a role when you heard this record?
Well, for me, I liked the record instantly when I first heard it, but I got this record in a very busy time. I was doing a lot of driving, and I found that it's not a good road record. I would always seemingly end my journey at the same point of this record, or I would always turn on and skip a couple tracks around, and it always landed in the middle part of the record where, if you're just pulling songs here and there, it feels like it drags a bit. But when you sit down and listen to this thing, give it the proper attention from front to back and front to back, and keep doing it and really get used to it, it unlocks a lot. And the pacing of the record is actually quite perfect. I have not read the lyrics. I can only feel what they're saying, if that makes any sense. But the more I got to know this album, we were talking a bit before we went on. There was like almost like a fifth member of the band going on this. There's like this, the musicality of it is very intricate when it needs to be, and more subdued when it needs to be. But somehow, George and Steve, the two of them, between bass and guitars and everything, there's like, even without Daniel, if you took Daniel out of the equation, there's like an underlying tone of emotion that's in this music. It sounds cheesy to say it, but when I listen to it, there's like a weight, there's a presence. There's a feeling of hopelessness, like someone lost on an ocean, with like feeling hopeless. They're not going to reach the shore. Like, what am I going to do? And I think there's maybe an element of that on here, just from what I can hear of the lyrics. And if so, I mean, it's amazing how they match the way the music fits the concept. It's kind of like Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Maiden, the whole middle part where there's like the creaking and the hopelessness and the bass thing ringing out. Steve wrote that song perfectly, so the feeling in the lyrics is transposed to the music, and that's very much a part of it here. I just can't overlook or not acknowledge the fact that there is a world building feeling of emotion that's a part of these compositions. I don't know if that was intentional, if that's just how it worked out. It's really cool, and I think that alone sets this album a bit apart of a lot of other records that have come out this year, in the last few years for sure. Yeah, 100. I saw that earlier today too, Wade. 100%, 4 reviews, and their last album had like 97% as well. I mean, this stuff is no joke, man. This is high-minded, well-composed, excellent metal. It is excellent. It's power metal, but it's not, strip away the cheese. It's really. What did you think about the whole emotional side of it, Kellen? I'm kind of rambling again. Sorry.
What I had today, I was thinking was when you compare and contrast it with Damn for All Time, like that record, it took them 20 years to sort of have it, come to fruition, but they also wrote it when they were, I guess teenagers, like 19, 20 years old. So 20 years of life experience, emotion, practicing your instrument. When you get a chance to finally write new songs, I just feel this record cuts deeper. It doesn't move quite as quickly, perhaps. And I think when we kind of shared notes on this, like there was initial sort of that middle ground of the record. We initially kind of were like, there's the pacing here feels a little bit like I'm waiting for it to kick in.
Yep.
Now you happen to just kind of understand that Lost at Sea component purely by listening to the music, like from an instrumental side of things. But I immediately sort of dove into the lyrics.
I still haven't read them. I'll be honest. I'm not a lyric guy. I'm just not.
Yeah. And it 100%, it is very big. The voyage sort of starts their journey, which is the third track.
Yep.
But once you get to track, they don't arrive at land until, I guess, track 7. So 4, 5, and 6, they're really, at sea. And that's where all the sort of the trials and tribulations,
yep.
And you get all this personal narrative that's going on in terms of the lyrics. It was completely well done. And I came away with it from it thinking like, this is it takes a different kind of songwriting prowess, right? When you can't rely on speed, when you have to write like more provocative melodies, when structurally you have to maximize within a certain amount of space, like write with greater economy.
It's a patient payoff. You got to be patient. You got to the long game.
Oh man, and there's a one song in particular that I didn't gravitate towards immediately, and now it's probably my favorite song on the record. Just because it's not the fastest, it's not like the Blizzard sort of power metal kind of stuff. Just the emotional pull and weight of it. I keep coming back to, and that's sort of the defining characteristics for this record. And it's something that I didn't commonly associate with power metal in general. So in that regard, it's just sort of like changed my perspective altogether and why I'm so high on this band. So,
which song was it?
The Sweet
Wine of Betrayal. It's my favorite song on the album as well. Yep.
Yeah. So that's kind of got my opening notes here, but I did pull aside some clips and we're just kind of go through them. And I know I kind of have individual notes here, but they kind of start the journey, and we'll talk about a little bit of the clips and kind of just breeze through this section. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the record, anyone out who's watching, here are just some few clips we'll throw your way. So like I mentioned, this is an epic heavy metal record, and it's written as such. So here we get the first track for you. This one is so I do you want to spend a quick moment before I jump into this talking about the track listing, because it can be kind of confusing for those who are following.
Well, see, I bought the CD, so I didn't realize the the problem with the vinyl.
Okay, so if Sacred Outcry does end up watching this the next day, what I will say is I am cheering for you to have all the success in the world. So next time you get a chance to release a record, you can do it in its entirety, and you don't have to make any compromises when it comes to printing them. So just so you hear the liner notes for the record, and the reason I bring them up is like there's two parts of it. So this is sort of what you get on the album, and then when you open it, I'll pull it up here so you can see. But there's a part of it that's called the full journey. I'll hold that up to the camera. And that's the actual like entirety of the experience. So they knew that they were going to be shortchanging the album in terms of the lyrical content, and that's why when you look on Metal Archives, there's 2 titles. So one of the titles, some of the titles are going for the CD, and some of the titles are going for the vinyl. And it's well, the lyrics are important. It's kind of unfortunate they weren't able to put together the entirety of the record on vinyl in the same way they were able to do on CD. And nonetheless, I have both. I will continue to pump money your way. So next time you get a chance, we'll get the full release. But
yeah, Wade, they pulled a couple songs off the LP, so they wouldn't have to go to LP.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to jump in here with our first track. This was entitled Through Lands Forgotten.
Through lands forgotten, far away from the...
Okay, this is sort of our instrumental start to the record. And in the story, it's just sort of our opening prologue. It's whatever, for a great epic record to start with like some acoustic piece with Daniel's voice singing over it. Great place to start, right? Nothing too complicated here, but it sort of sets the stage.
And it's also good to show that there's, you know, acoustic instruments, you know, it's used very tastefully here and there, and it adds a very awesome flair and color to the music for sure.
Right, it sets the stage. We should also probably mention there's like a orchestral backing to it.
Yeah.
But I never felt like it was so prominent on the record that it sort of dominated, right? I wouldn't classify this as a symphonic power metal record, would you?
No.
Right, but it plays a role over all of this. Okay.
And we've kind of skipped around a little bit, but we should talk about Daniel for a minute because
okay.
My God. It's, you know, the few albums I've shown, he's an amazing singer. He does amazing work with Lost Horizon, he sings with such a confidence and so sure of his abilities. It's obviously he also felt the emotion in this music, and there is enough space in this music where he could really shine, and he takes it. He can, all the octaves he can sing, it's amazing, but he takes it up to these super high like squeals that probably didn't need to go there, but he knows he can go there, so he goes there, and it's perfect. It works. I want it. I want more of it. It's like this album I shown here. Some of the music is so complex. It's almost like, you know, why would you have, like Ben made the comment earlier in here, why would you have Daniel, one of the best singers in metal, come and sing on some of your songs? Whereas, you know, they were way more into writing instrumental, techie power metal. Here, it's the perfect marriage of emotion, and you got a guy that can sing his heart out with emotion, and this is a perfect foundation for him to really, really shine. Not that he needs to prove himself by any means. He's done that. It's a perfect marriage, and I hope that this continues. I want to hear the follow-up to this with him singing on it. I want to actually hear a band with him grow instead of just fill-ins here and there. You know, he did 2 albums with Lost Horizon, and everything else that I've heard, it's just him kind of filling in, or there's some stuff I have not heard at all that he's done. So, I mean, bravo. The vocal performance is second to none on this record. It really is. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I knew on Lost Horizon, which is a much more of like a traditional Euro power metal record to me. At least Awakening the World. I know their second release I haven't picked up yet, and you have recommended it very much. The that I go check it out.
Oh,
But
it's way more complex, way more synth based. It still rules, but it's not. Awakening the World is perfect. It's such a good album. I know you don't think it's perfect. There's some pacing problems with you, the way it kind of peters out at the end. But
what's funny though is I would probably return to that record with. Now I haven't listened to it because I've been spinning Sacred Outcry, so I haven't spun it in a while. But for the same hesitation that I initially had, it's probably the appeal that I found on Towers of Gold, right? So, meaning, right, like the more dramatic songs that sort of are on the back end of Waking the World, I may listen to in a different way given my attraction to Towers of Gold, since it is a bit more mid-paced. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But his ability, I guess, it just feels he has a talent to step into a situation, right? Like I don't think he's necessarily writing these lyrics. I think I could be wrong about that, but I believe the lyrics have been written by George. I think they'll correct me when they see this, but the fact that he can step into a character or a protagonist in this case, and it never feels like so performative that he's like not being himself, or he's just not providing some like element of who he is as a character, and as a vocalist to the record. Like it always feels like he's absolutely living in that moment when he's singing, and he's not like at any means stressed, or when you're about to hit, like you can hear him climbing and you're, man, he's not going to go for that note, and he just absolutely knocks it out of the park.
confidence. Yep.
Oh man, and he'll sometimes like harmonize on that. There's a couple times on this record where he's screeching at the top of, it's totally at the top of his register, you assume, and you can hear him putting harmonies on top of that note.
He knows how and when to layer with himself. It's very cool how they build it. Yeah.
It's to be, I guess, like in such control as for a vocal performance, right? That whatever you're going to throw at the individual, they can, it's totally within their grasp, but they can also embellish their own personality into it.
Yeah.
This is a record, and I would have to say on paper, just if you were to look at, like, I don't know, and looking at the notes, right? It would be it'd be super intimidating just to hit it, but like to push back, or to feel like I've not only got this, but I'm going to give you something more that's not on the paper. Is an incredible talent. I will say this on top of that. We're, as much as we're going to gush about his performance tonight, just like we did for Lost Horizon,
yeah,
because it's unavoidable. I always felt, though, that his performance never distracted from the overall experience of this record. And I really just want to take a moment, because my goodness, like, yes, is there a better vocalist singing traditional metal right now? I mean, or at least in this style, for me, no. But all of the from the guitar work, the bass work, the drum work, everything contributes to the experience here. And I never felt like he could potentially be asserting a level of ego in the studio or when the mixing process. It did not feel that way at all. He was recruited based on his talent, based on his sort of legendary status in Lost Horizon. I believe George even says, like, when he was writing records, he was envisioning Daniel. He couldn't have Eric Adams from 1980.
Yep.
So he got Daniel was the guy he wanted.
Now, you did make a mention, you called this early on epic heavy metal. You throw the epic in there, and yeah, the feeling of this is epic. But when I think of epic metal bands, I think of what we mentioned, Atlantean Codex. I think of Doomsword. I think of Manila Road. I think in what kind of vocals is typical in those? It's kind of salt of the earth style vocalists, guys that don't have that operatic power range. They're so I mean, on paper, I mean, if you want to throw this into the epic metal realm, on paper, Daniel isn't maybe the right fit for something like that. Would you agree?
He's not what I think. Most epic heavy metal vocalists, I would say the Atlantean Codex singer is probably the exception. I do think there's a bit of power metal in that vocal.
Yeah, he can.
But I mean, let's talk about the iconography, right? Like, if you look at classic American epic heavy metal vocalists, they're more known for being like kind of odd. You know, I wouldn't associate
There's an element
Mark
of machismo, like masculinity there. It's not
Sure.
necessarily, I'm not saying that Daniel, just that operatic high register vocal style is just, it's a bit not what you would expect. And I don't think, this to me is a power metal record with epic tendencies.
Right.
You can't get around the fact that there is something a bit more going on below the surface, musically.
Right. Yeah. I will concede that. Like, first and foremost, if you ask me to describe this, it's a power metal record for sure.
That's what most people are going to understand what it is. I mean, it's like Warlord. I mean, Warlord, that's a great, if that was an inspiration, Warlord with Manowar, I mean, wow, they kind of nailed it in their own kind of way. It's kind of a, because, Warlord, I mean, for American power metal, it's kind of the same thing. They don't really fit in the European realm that well. They're just an American sounding band. And I don't know, we're getting off track here. Sorry. I'm pontificating on, when you say epic metal, and I'm thinking, if I was an epic metal band, I mean, as much as I would want Daniel, I don't know if that would fit what it's supposed to be. So
sure. Sure. He doesn't sound like Mark Shelton. You know what I mean? Like, that's what
he doesn't sound like a grizzled old wizard,
Right. Yeah. So I totally get, like, in terms of what you commonly associate with the genre, he doesn't fit the role. Okay. So here's a good transition point, because I also do think they remind me a little bit of, like, Imaginations from the Other Side, Blind Guardian. And this next track, so The Flame Rekindled, is one of those moments where the bit more of aggressive sort of speed metal riffing comes in. Mm-hmm. So here's the second track off of Towers of Gold, The Flame Rekindled. Right, like, totally different pacing, right?
Yeah.
And I think when we were listening to this initially, that was like, okay, I heard this a little bit more in Damn for All Time. I kind of thought this would be a bit more of this vibe. It kind of proved to be a good place to start this record, but I would not say it's the consistent sort of theme or pacing that you get through Towers of Gold.
Yeah.
Would you say that's fair?
Oh, that's totally fair. Yeah. And they recall that and even go even further into that on this title track. There's some shredding speed metal-y type guitar work on that as well. It's like, holy crap, what a riff, Well, I'm sure we'll get to that later.
Yeah, and I would say, like, the band members have played in different, through the time period that Sacred Outcry was not active. They'd been in other bands that were playing in more extreme styles of heavy metal. So just like Lost Horizon brought in, their experience, previous
Luciferion.
Yeah, with Luciferion. Mm-hmm. You got that here. Okay. So this track sort of details lyrically, like, there's an old man that comes in to this group of sort of downtrodden soldiers and promises the world, right? It promises their wealth, and there's this secret Towers of Gold area, and the journey has begun. So moves into the track that I think was the lead single that I became absolutely obsessed with when I first heard it, and it was the one used in the promo here earlier today. So
the infamous promo.
Yeah. This is third track, Voyage. Oh.
Wrong one.
Here we go. All right, we're
so good. So good. The riffing and the song crafting on this record is really exceptional. Really, really well thought out Excellent writing.
Yeah. This it's also like probably one of the more memorable solos for me on this record too.
Yeah.
A high point, and this is, but like when we were talking about in terms of the pacing of the record, here we get two more upbeat tracks that essentially are the in the sort of epic narrative are leading us out to sea. So they're, in the storytelling, it's the excitement of these, adventurers off on the journey.
Yep.
But this is before, all of the trials that are soon to sort of befall them. And if you're listening to this record for the first time, I think if you don't know that's coming, the three tracks that follow here are kind of a bit of a confusion, moments of confusion. Because there is like a dramatic gear shift that happens.
Oh yeah. Definitely. And it's like I said, there's like a feeling of longing, like hopelessness in those tracks. And really, like, again, as a concept record, knowing that, and then, the way the tale is structured, the music fits it perfectly. Intro, mystical, starting the journey. Someone tells you all the treasures could be yours if you go out on this quest. They go on the quest, doesn't go the way they want. They're stranded at sea. And then towards the end, it gets more triumphant and aggressive again at the end. It's just, it's really a smart record. It's really well done.
Okay. So here for track number 4, we get Into the Storm, was our first sort of trials and tribulation for our journeymen. So here's Into the Storm, track number 4. Okay, that also probably one of my favorite drumming parts on this record. I guess the drummer had plays also in a like progressive death metal band. What I would just also want to point out is the production here. We kind of mentioned in terms of like a personality that it contributes to Towers of Gold. For me, it also walks the line of what I would think a modern power metal record should sound like, meaning everything is pretty clear and clean, because it's sort of a calling card for European power metal. But there you don't lose a lot of like color and shading with this record in terms of what the instruments provide.
It's
the
not so clean. It doesn't make it. It's not clinical. I mean, there are some albums that are so clean it sounds like it was made in a machine. It's got clarity. It's got power. It's got, again, there's an atmosphere here, which, attributed to the songwriting and maybe some stuff they're layering in the background, but there's nothing here that rounds any of the edge off, any of the ferocity when it needs to be. And it's just a well-recorded record. It sounds damn near perfect to me. And there's nothing when I listen to it that bothers me. Like you can tell when something's too clinical. I mean, I would say this record is very clinical, but this album rules. This is like if Emperor did symphonic power metal. It's great. But it's super, super. Oh, hey, Twilight Force at the Heart of Wintervale.
You can check Marty's album review. He did one for that record.
Yep. I've liked it way more since I've reviewed that record too, by the way. But, yeah, they found a sound. They found a really good, clear, professional, expensive. It sounds like an expensive record. It just does. It doesn't sound like it was done on someone's desktop, which maybe it was. I have no idea, but yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. The production for me sounded perfect. Anytime an instrument really needed to be highlighted, like we mentioned earlier, as much as this is a Daniel, is an all-star on this record.
Totally.
I mean, the guitar work, bass when it needs to. There's some crazy bass solos on this album as well. That on this song, like there's a great breakdown after a solo where the drums sort of guide us into the outro verse.
Yep.
Everything just sounds great. Clear to the point where no individual sort of overshadowing one another. So well done on the production for this record. So
And basically a golden rule is if you listen to an album and the production doesn't get in the way of your enjoyment of the album, it's a good production.
Sure. I think this one, even to our point earlier, like takes it a step further. It adds another element.
Yeah.
So instead of just sort of being a neutral sort of presentation that doesn't distract it, I would also say like it contributes a different sort of element, like we talked about earlier. Okay. So during the course of this listen, we've kind of reached the midway point, and we get another sort of slower song. This one in particular starts with an acoustic sort of intro, and picks up later on. And the protagonist in the story sort of lyrically is talking about sort of a consistent thing to this record is he's hearing sort of voices in the wind. So the song sort of presides over our protagonist lost at sea and is sort of being tempted through into insanity by hearing these voices. Daniel's constantly sort of navigating that from a lyrical perspective and how he's singing. And anyway, this was track number 5, entitled Symphony of the Night. Let's see if I get it this time.
No pain, no whispers, no light.
Man, the
I'm just
pacing
going to
of this
probably listen to
one,
this record tonight again.
the pacing of this record, like especially the song. So if it rewards you for the first like 2.5 minutes, if you can handle like the slower moments, it just sort of takes in at that like mid-paced sort of rolling double bass there, that
Which is very much a Euro power metal
100%, right? Yeah. Like that is dead center in terms of a defining characteristic for the genre. So as I'm playing through these, like, is it all? I know you've listened to it a bunch, but like I've memorized all these moments, whatever.
Yeah, it just makes me excited to listen to it again. Yep.
All right. Yes, Greek epicness for sure. All right.
Oh yeah.
So this is the midpoint of the record. This track, A Midnight Reverie number 6, comes along, and to me, it almost feels like an interlude. I don't know if you remember, it's kind of Daniel by himself almost, with like some symphonic elements going on.
See, I didn't. I just felt like I said I take this as an album. Typically, I didn't know if that was its own track or in another track. You know, I just, like I said,
sure,
I take these in as a whole solid album.
It bled into the next. Well, here I'll give you a quick refresher, and you'll probably.
Oh yeah.
Here we go. So this is track number 6, A Midnight Reverie. I mean, have you just heard that? Right? Like it's just him and like an orchestra, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm in.
Yeah.
Take my money.
It's cool how like you can, within an epic heavy metal. Let's take a quick moment to talk about this. So, we were talking earlier about what defines that genre, and then we were just specifically kind of getting into like how a vocalist should sound. But I think one of the key features often when you're coming to those records, and kind of to your experience or thoughts on kind of listening to this collectively as opposed to as individual tracks, I think it's really important that he's able to sort of connect and be that connect all the songs and be that sort of storyteller, that narrative voice through the entire record. Because it's really just him singing. He's not relying on anyone else to sort of add to that. So he has to be all the characters and tell the entire story by himself.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, it's a defining characteristic for epic heavy metal for me. Did you feel the same way?
I guess I didn't think about it that deeply about that, I guess. And like I said, I didn't read the lyrics, and I connected this more on an emotional level. Like I said, this is a very much there's a lot of give and take on here, and I feel like I'm along emotionally for the ride. And They give, like the piece you just played, it's very much a part of the record, and the fact that it plays into the concept is just another good sign of they're writing not just songs here. They're like, okay, this point of the journey, we need a piece like this. They're actually writing this from beginning to end. They're writing this record and putting in a symphonic piece where Daniel just goes by himself type of thing. It's, again, world building. That's part of the whole. I got more out of, like I said, lyrics. I'm sorry, people. Sometimes I read them, sometimes I don't. When I was a kid, I would study lyrics and care, but the older I've gotten so used to crappy lyrics, I just don't care anymore what people have to say, I guess. And I take it, the music and how the lyrics and the vocals, interact with stuff like this. This is what makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It's the stuff that, without me knowing what they're singing about, I'm still being given a tale. I'm still a part of this story. I feel, like I said, this feels like a conceptual record without knowing that it is. It just has the feeling of it. It feels like an epic movie or journey, or so yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to answer your question, to be completely honest, or if I have, I feel like I maybe should have read the lyrics before we done this, but I didn't.
Well, let's just talk about like some of your favorite. You did a great deep dive on Manila Road, right?
Yeah.
And it's a band where specifically like that iconic era for me, early 80s to the end of the 80s, that run of albums for Manila Road. Mark is what was such an integral voice for that.
And he sang with a lot of emotion.
Tons of emotion, right? So it wasn't like his technical performance that was amazing, but you felt like, this whatever mystical wizard guiding a record, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the way he sang, you could feel and hear the years in his voice, and the way he wrote riffs and melodies, and there's a very somber quality to some of the stuff he wrote. The way his lyrics interacted with that spoke more to me than what he was saying. I have gone back and read some Manila Road lyrics, and there's some of them are awesome. They're great. He's a great lyricist. High concept, and Poe and all these other mystical type of things he would write about. It's very cool. But yeah, it's that again. It's feel for me. That's why Manila Road connected so hard, because is he writing the most complex music in the world? No, but there's so much feeling and spirit in it. It's hard not to take notice. And the way, especially after his voice was kind of ruined, he had when they got back together, he brought in Brian Patrick to sing, who sings a lot like him in his younger years. But the ones where he would still take the center stage on, the more tortured and struggling it sounded like he was doing, it just fit perfectly. It just, like I said, he sounded like a grizzled old wizard. And man, I loved it. I just love the way the vocals interact with the music. And that's why, another reason why this record, and reason why Lost Horizon, because Lost Horizon, if people want to talk about cheese, that can be easily considered as cheese. They're wearing capes on the cover of the album. A lot of the lyrics are very positive, self-affirmation type stuff. Just remember you are metal type stuff. And yeah, that's why I don't always, of course you can hear it and you know the lyrics after a while, but I don't need to read it. And here I don't, again, I didn't care, because the music and the way the lyrics interacted with the music spoke volumes to me. So I will get to the lyrics eventually. I just haven't done it yet.
Sure. It's all good. Okay. Well, that brings us here to, I think we mentioned earlier, probably our favorite track of this record.
Yeah, this song rules, man. Great. So much passion and emotion on this.
Tons of and it's the one. So just a little bit of explanation on the track listing that we mentioned earlier. So on the vinyl, they have it titled chapter 7, The Perennial Sin. And what it is there's a narration that kind of opens and closes the song. And it just kind of narrates the story in a manner of minutes, as opposed to like actually telling you what the song on the CD, uses the lyrics to convey. So you get like a there's actually, I think, one verse is borrowed from the Sweet Wine of Betrayal. But the majority of that moment is like a intro outro narrator talking about, essentially telling the story. So you get a 7-minute long song on the CD versus a pretty short few minutes here on the actual record. So if that's
such a bummer.
Yeah,
it's such a bummer.
Now, of course, if in this day and age, you can like stream the song. If you want to get the vinyl, if you're a vinyl person, it's like, I guess we're here talking to the metal VC as collectors. So
yeah,
that happens, I guess, every once in a while. So they switch a track listing or something's removed.
But if you don't do streaming and you didn't read any of the info, you just bought the record and listened to it, you wouldn't know.
Right.
You would never know. Yeah.
It was it was one of those things where I had both, and I was like, something. And when I get to side B of this vinyl, like, where's the narration on the CD? I didn't put it together because I was just taking it in, and then I thought, I can't believe this is happening. This song is not available like on my vinyl record. It is such a heartbreaking moment. So I hope that in the future, like, they do a like repress of this and whatever it takes to get the full experience that they have on the CD comes to vinyl, hopefully. But
they could even done like a 3-sided record and then had like a cool etching or the logo etched on side B. That's
I
common.
just don't know if
it's more money, but it's cool. It's common. Yep.
Hopefully in the future that happens. But if it is anything to like drive home the our support for this, is because this song is that good.
Yes.
It starts slow, and it just is by no means like a super fast song or heavy song in that regard, but the emotional tenor of this track just builds, and like by the time I'm like half the solo hits, it's not a blistering solo, it's just this dual guitar melody that continually gathers weight and steam. Man, it's a hallmark track on this album.
Absolutely.
And obviously Daniel's in full form and completely like has this track by the throat. So
yeah, he's completely he's so unleashed on this record, which is very cool. And like the other two that I showed earlier, he's not really. He sounds great, and he adds cool stuff to both these records, but he really fits well with this music. It's a great union for sure. I hope it continues.
Okay, so after all our gushing, I'll give you a quick clip of
song so good.
The Sweet Wine of Betrayal. All right, that's like the as they come out of the middle of the song. I'm trying to stick to my rules here on YouTube, but I could have made like a 2-minute.
We could have just played the song. We could have just played the song.
Just play the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, The Voyage was the first track that I heard on this record. And I've probably listened to it 20 billion times because I was the lead single, and it's still tons of fun to listen to. But man, this track has really grown on me, and it just feels like a major accomplishment on this record. Just incredible track.
Absolutely. Full agreement.
Okay. Full send. So in terms of like our narrative here, I'll just kind of tie us back into our story. So at this point, our heroes, I don't want to spoil the lyrics for you, Marty, but like our heroes have landed they finally, come off the boat, and the voices in our sort of protagonist's head has driven him to murder, to kill all of his compatriots.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like, obviously greed, power, are like driving forces on this record in terms of themes.
Are they trying to spin it like the Siren's tale from the Odyssey? Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely similar elements of that. But the voices in our protagonist's head here are coming from somewhere else, and we get to that at the end here. But it's important to understand that component in terms of now our hero is become villain and
Off his rocker.
off his rocker, murdered all of his shipmates, and is trying to find these towers of gold. So in that moment, we have arrived, and our next track here is City of Stone. So, which is basically we see these towers, etc., in the area, and I would say in terms of the pacing in this track, it's a little bit faster than where we've sort of come out of the lull at sea, our deranged murder spree. And now
Frantically trying to find these towers. Yes.
Frantically trying to find these towers. And so there's a sense of like moment of arrival he sees where we've always been sort of destined to go on this track. So we'll play a quick clip here of City of Stone.
The town is dead, but yet it speaks and calls my name.
Right. A little bit quicker there. Interestingly enough, this is one of those tracks that feels like it's important to have on a record just to sort of connect things, but I don't feel it, for me personally, it always grabs me as like being the key song on the track on the record.
Yeah. The song after it though is another high point for me.
Okay, so let's talk about this because it looks like it's going to be a theme for Sacred Outcry. Dan for All Time also had this is a long extended track as well. So I believe on Dan for All Time,
and it's in the same spot too. They put the title track in the same spot as it. I did not notice that.
Yep. So we've got a 14-minute song for the title track on Dan for All Time. We also have a 14-minute track here, Towers of Gold. Which, man, this song, what would you say in terms of composition, right? Probably has 8, 9 different sections, like in terms of build up, breakdown, build up, breakdown.
Yeah, this is also the one that has like the Maiden bass thing and the choir in the background.
Yeah.
It sounds like a Maiden off a middle era Maiden record. Yeah, there's a lot of ups and downs in this song. It starts off with this early in the song. There's like this ripping, awesome technical riff. I don't know if you put that in the clip or not, but man, it's just my air guitar can't even go that fast. I can't quite get it tuned up to go that quick. But yeah, and I just love how you come out of this lull in the middle of the album into things are really starting to happen. Obviously in the story, the concept, things are getting more intense and the song reflects it, but yet there are moments where it takes you back down. It's structured like another concept album within the album. It's really a well done song. Very ambitious.
Right. It probably has, like, in terms of the dynamic range in it, right? The quietest moments on this record. And to your point, like the beginning section to this is probably one of the most aggressive moments on this record.
On the album, yeah, for sure.
There's some super like almost thrash kind of speed metal moments.
That's where the speed metal comes in, and that right there kind of feels like a nod to Lost Horizon a little bit to me.
Absolutely. I remember listening to Waking the World, and I kept on thinking, like, there's a little bit of almost mellow death on this, for Lost Horizon. And sure enough, like, they had a kind of a death metal background.
Yep.
But you could hear, like, sure, it's not completely there. It's not a death metal or whatever record.
I've got one Luciferion record, and there's parts in some of the album. It sounds like Lost Horizon. It's weird. It's weird. Anyway.
Yeah. But on this is one of those moments where it's like, okay, they probably planned something besides power metal, like, or they listen to something besides power metal, at least, like,
Yeah.
there's something in their toolbox and or ability that extends beyond your just generic sort of Blind Guardian stuff. So,
But they do a really good job at, borrowing from it, but not making it obvious. It never really deviates from what it is, a power metal, epic power metal album. It doesn't, there's no deathly riffs on here. I mean, there's some savage speed metal type stuff, but that really fits quite well with this style. I like bands that do that.
right.
Another band that did a lot, Agent Steel. I mean, Agent Steel, outside looking in, it's a power metal band, but you listen to those riffs, they're so savage. It's speed metal, wolf in sheep's clothing type of thing,
Yeah, I very much think like it doesn't say so long on this song that it kind of feels like it's it dominates it, but after having so much of like the slowed sort of ease pacing, I always came back to it kind of caught off guard by how aggressive it got.
Yep. So wake up moment.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so here's a clip of Towers of Gold. I mean, it was like 14 minutes, so I had to pick something. But
what are you gonna do? Yeah.
But
Good
yeah,
luck.
like
9 seconds or whatever. Did you go 9 seconds or less on those?
Yeah, but it's, I mean, to your point about like how the epic nature of it, the choral arrangements come in like probably 3 or 4 different times.
Yeah.
Big orchestra, some very quiet piano moments.
Mm-hmm.
But like we were just talking about, almost like speed metal at times as well. So the story here we have this moment where our hero finally gets to the Tower of Gold, only to realize essentially it's his doom. That the voices he's been hearing is, centuries of other heroes and soldiers who have succumbed to their shortcomings and greed, and this tower has consumed them. And the voices that he's heard through the years are old, ancient, dying soldiers who's, have warned and tempted him. So it's like it's a tragedy, right? It's a Greek tragedy in that regard.
Yeah.
A hero, like, totally in an epic narrative where a hero, despite all of his best intentions, succumbed to powers beyond his control. And it's, for so many, I think it's just cool to find a band that took the time to take that into consideration, right? Like in the same way you would make a great movie, like you talk about that cinematic nature to it, something that's unexpected. So a lot of European power metal, which we both agree this record ultimately is, to your point, it's not dolphins and whatever, sex condors and all
Unfortunately,
like, yeah, unfortunately,
or dragons,
no dragons, swords. Like, they're very much interested in telling a story that is based in like a lyrical tradition, especially this one that's often associated with the country of origin, right? Being from Greece. So like I take I appreciate to an incredible degree that George, who I think is doing the lyrics here, took the time to like map that out. We're going to come back to the table after, having 20 years to sit on a record. When we do come back, we're not just sort of going to be happy with being present and putting out records consistently. Like, we want to up our game and do something that is far beyond something that we wrote when we were much younger in our life.
This is a massive undertaking, and this isn't a type of record you're shitting out in a year. You could, I mean, if there's only one guy really spearheading a lion's share of the songwriting on here, wow. I mean, wow, there's a lot going on here. And to be so forward thinking that you're going to make it a concept, know what the story is, and then write the music to accommodate the story God, there's just so much more than, a couple dudes drunk in a rehearsal room throwing riffs at each other. That's cool. There's just, applause, man. Hats off to these guys for really sticking with it and seeing it through to the end. And I can't imagine the frustration they went through, having to sit on their first record. By all means, go get the first record as well, because it's exceptional. It's a really good record. Is it as good as this one? No, but you can tell it's the same band. I think the songwriting is just as good on the first record. I even like Yannis Papadopoulos. I like his vocals. I think if he sang on this one too, it'd be fine. He's a fine singer. But anyway, we're off topic here. Go ahead.
No, I think to your point though, like, in terms of the growth, right? I think that what you're trying to get at.
It's obvious. They honed their craft considerably. Their songwriting is way more in depth than the first one, and more in depth than most of the bands in this. I keep pointing back to this Twilight Force. There is complexity beyond comprehension on there. Like I said, it's Emperor, but power metal. The symphonic nature of it, the endless complex riffage, but yet still having melody. This is very much European, 100% European power metal with some blast beats. They modernized it a bit. What they're doing over here is something a little bit more, to me anyway.
Okay. So that comes, we finally, after all this journey and our hero succumbed to his shortcomings as a person. We get our we close this out with the last track, which we kind of like get these bookended, just like through Lands Forgotten. It started the record, Where Crimson Shadows Dwell, which is also a part of the lyrics in terms of like warning signs. But here we'll get a quick clip from the last track here.
Shadows, my time has come to die.
Once again, him harmonizing, right? Like that just him.
He knows how to do it so well. He, like you said, when he's doing the super high screechy shit, he's doing layers underneath that too. It's like, wow.
Yeah. And once it's like we get an orchestral sort of background to that for the most part, and just him delivering the end of this record. Perfect way to close it.
Otherworldly. Great.
Amazing. Okay. Well, let's come to the closing aspect of this record. Obviously Sacred Outcry was in here earlier, and the potentially concerned that whether we'd be casting any shade on there on this release.
Oh,
there's
hell
none to be had.
No shade.
Yeah.
And for people to turn their nose, it's just cheesy power metal. I mean, God, I get it. If you're not into that style, it's going to be harder for you to get around that. But if you just look at it from a heavy metal standpoint, there is nothing wrong here. It's all good. And it's so much more in depth. It's one of those albums you want to sit down and listen to with your favorite drink and just sit and stare at the speakers and listen. Maybe read along with the lyrics. Whatever that's like. Not enough pictures in here. I need pictures so I can read. But yeah, it's like I said, not a road trip vehicle. It's not a road trip type of album. It's a sit in front of the speakers and just take it in. It's one of those records. And there's not a lot of those made these days. Yeah, it happens still. There's still good stuff. I'm not discrediting everything, but especially in this style, it's a lot of the, like bands like Twilight Force and Sabaton. They're playing for the festival markets. They're big, quick, poppy type songs. These aren't poppy songs. They're very, very complex and complex, yet still holding firm to atmosphere and emotion, which is rare. Complexity doesn't always breed good emotion. It just doesn't. Complexity doesn't always breed world building. I mean, one of the bands that has taken me the most places, Astral Plane style, has been Summoning. And that's just kind of plotting, layered black metal, high melody. And for an album like this to do that, it's pretty special. Makes it a pretty special release in the heavy metal sphere. What do you think?
So yes, I mean, exceptional record. I would even like. I'm curious to. There also don't seem like there's any peers playing in this style right now to me. Like, because if we think of them as being purely a power metal band, you know, is there anyone else that you, I mean, I'm going to turn here to you because of your.
There's so much I don't know. I mean, I've spent so much time over the years trying to find all the thrash bands that I missed and death and black metal, you know, picking up all this crap. And now finally coming to the point in my age and mental disposition where I want to listen to more power type metal. I would say that Triumpher record, I don't think it's as dense as this, but I think this is a solid record. It's got a lot of speed metal on it. It's interestingly written. It's not as deep as the Sacred Outcry, but this Triumpher record is really good. Really good. Similar style, maybe, although they do add some aggression to it as well. There's some blasting and some rough vocals here and there, but
I guess where I was going is like for a lot of the, you know, bands who potentially are so defined by their influences, they don't necessarily have the most unique sound to themselves, which is totally fine.
yeah.
So, okay, but I think they deserve to be at least credited with obviously blending different sort of genres and doing it in a way that I don't think there's many bands for me personally who I immediately sort of would associate them with. There's enough.
The Warrior or the Man of War and Warlord, I mean, that's a perfect. I mean, they describe their own music perfectly.
Right.
I mean, if you say that to me, I want to hear what that union sounds like. It's here with a better singer than both of those other bands. You know, of course, Eric Adams is a great singer, but Daniel crushes most people. The only rival he would have would be Kiska. I think Michael Kiska, but
sure, there you go.
it all comes back to
Halloween gets a chance to make an appearance. Okay. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I know Marty's kind of given his thoughts on how much he's enjoyed this record.
Oh yeah.
But it is, you know, my favorite record to come out this year, and more importantly,
mine too.
I think,
by the way, it's going to be my favorite for the year for sure.
At least, you know, here we are in July, and I can definitely say like I've spent more time with this release than any other, and more. I also just want to give a special, like, you know, I hope Sacred Outcry like hears this and you know, they do feel like after all the time of not having a record, you know, have it sit on the shelf. I hope they do feel like the amount of appreciation that you know, people who are discovering them, how much they enjoy their releases. And for me, like this has been a great sort of, like we were talking about at the beginning, sort of opening a door into a world of music that I previously wasn't listening to. So if, you know, from Marty back in the day, if that was Halloween, you know, and here I am in 2023 pulling Sacred Outcry, and it's kind of giving me a window into different kinds of music. Like, hopefully, you know, they hear that and also understand, like, for me, that's a great sort of gift to have. It's
very cool
to find a band that you love and put out, you know, killer records, but also sort of open new areas of opportunity in your listening and appreciation for bands who previously didn't, you know, were on your radar. So
DG's got a good point. Atlantean Codex could be considered their peers in terms of grand storytelling and epic saga feeling without falling into Euro cheese. Agreed.
Absolutely. I just think we would also both say that they're a bit more of a doom band.
Yeah, more epic. They're more epic metal leaning into doom, I think.
Yeah. But I totally agree with where you're going, DG, in terms of like the storytelling side of things, or pulling different sort of subgenres and doing it in a unique way. So,
man, the lyrical concepts on the latest Atlantean Codex record are wow, so good. It's so deep. Very good.
Okay, well, we have given this record all sorts of praise.
2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up. I just want to thank everyone. This is my first live stream, so if you stopped by, tuned in, thank you so much for joining in the chat. See a lot of familiar faces.
Oh yeah.
And thanks, Rick. Simon jumped in there, but I mean, a lot of these good people recognize Wade, DJ. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for stopping by. For anyone out in Europe who had to bounce early, hopefully you catch this tomorrow when you wake up. So, thank you so much for watching, Marty. Thank you for joining me here.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun as always.
My first
Always
adventure into this. I only messed up one thing.
Oh,
so,
it's no big deal. No big deal.
But yeah. Anyway, it was cool sort of like venturing into this side of the YouTube world, and I'll get a chance to work on this.
Yep.
But thank you so much for joining me and for talking all things Sacred Outcry. And anything that you want to, while I got you here, I mean, you were just on the other night talking Thin Lizzy, but anything has changed since then? Or we've got Spawn of Possession on
Wednesday. The Cabinet is the name of the album, which I still have not listened to yet. Next Friday, we don't know yet. There'll be a review up from Melanie on Monday. Check out Heavy Metallurgy, and we'll be seeing this fine gentleman doing a review soon too, I'm sure, on the channel later on. And it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Anytime. Just call. I'll be there. Put up the bat signal. I'll be there.
If that includes me doing a promo again, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be hard to top this one. If you do another promo, I don't know how that's gonna go.
Yeah, I don't know if YouTube may flag my next attempt at continue down this road.
Yep.
All right. So just so people on my channel know, I've got a review that I need to get recorded here for Heavy Metallurgy. And then, so hopefully, Melanie will be on this week. Maybe I'll get that to Marty by next week, if there's not already someone listed, but
not yet.
And I also have a episode of Blood from Stone, which is my 90s American traditional heavy metal series. I've got a band coming from Michigan that I'll be putting together sort of like a period study and a band sort of biography on. Crazy band coming out of the late 80s, early 90s from Jackson, Michigan, playing epic heavy metal. So look for that in the coming future. Other than that, I think we're good to put a bow on it.
Put a bow.
All right.
Good seeing everybody. Thanks for showing up. It was a lot of fun.
Good night, everyone.